This workshop is going to be conducted based on the memory of Dr. Yunesi, who for the first time introduced Charles Dickens to the Iranian audience. And but I'm going to have some regarding the relationship between the kinds of novels he chose for translation. Prior to the Renaissance, there were no literary schools. We had some literary movements, literary circles, literary groups, something like Sons of Benz, literary schools, blah, blah. However, it was after Renaissance that you have major literary schools like those two modern schools, Neoclassicism and Romanticism. We are going to refer to them as the modern schools. In that, the other subsequent, let's say, literary schools were to some extent based on that. For example, the origin of realism is going to be much more in close affinity to neoclassicism than to romanticism. Or symbolism, on the other hand, is going to be something like a continuation of romanticism than that of neoclassicism. So we are going to refer to those two schools, neoclassicism and romanticism, two major modern schools. The other subsequent schools, including realism, naturalism, symbolism, expressionism, dadaism, futurism, subjectivism, objectivism, surrealism, modernism, whatever, there are going to be the subsequent schools. Dr. Yunesi put his finger on a couple of these schools, the most famous of which is going to be realism and naturalism, that is somehow considered as a subcategory of realism, which some people believe naturalism to be a subcategory of realism or an independent literary school itself. In the rise of the novel, you have several, let's say, elements, as mentioned by Ayn Rand in the rise of the novel. The enlargement of the cities, the importance of the social relations, the rise of the middle class, individuality. So, these elements that are going to be that contributed to the rise of the novel in the 18th century are going to be most observed in realistic novel. For instance, in a Gothic novel, or in Roman à clef or novel with a key, there are big differences. However, Dr. Yunesi was mostly focusing on two major kinds of novels. In the typology of novels, you have more than 40 kinds of novels. Historical novel, novel of manners, novel with the keys, social novel, a surrealistic novel, psychological novel, modernist novel, provincial novel, novel of sensibility, more than 50 kinds of novels in typology of novels. However, Dr. Yunesi put his most emphasis on realistic novel. And that's why, in the genre of realism, he referred to George Eliot, to Charles Dickens, and also in the genre of naturalism, he referred to Thomas Hardy in English literature and Theodore Dreiser in American literature. Since Theodore Dreiser is one of the greatest naturalist novelists in American literature. Before going to the discussion of the translations done by Dr. Yunesi, it's better to somehow divide the whole bunch of literature, let's say, into two major groups, yeah? On one hand, let's say we can name 5 major world authors similar to each other. On the first group, in American literature, let's put our finger on William Faulkner. In English literature, let's address James Joyce. In French, let's address Marcel Proust. In the minority literature of the German literature, Kafka. In Persian literature, Sadjadi. I personally do believe that there is a big association between these 5 novelists all over the world, as far as the worldview is concerned, as far as the thematic concerns are going to be significant. Hidayat in Persian literature, Faulkner in American literature, Joyce in English-speaking world, Proust in French, and let's say Kafka in German. On the other side of the coin, there is another kind of literature that deals with some other motives. If you explore these words, the motives in the first kind is going to mostly alienation. For example, the alienation of the narrator in The Blind Owl, Bufuku in Hidayah, for example. Alienation of the characters, number one. Commoditization or reification of the characters as one of the negative consequences of modern time. Reification, commoditization, alienation, spiritual emptiness, loss of cultural heritage. These are the major motives represented in the modernist works of these five writers. On the other side of the coin, you have a literature that deals with hope, deals with humanitarian aspects, deals with aspirations, deals with the glorification of the middle class, and deals with aspirations and hope. That is the literature which Dr. Ebrahim Yunesi translated. Once he said that, I translated Shirley by Bronte, some 700 pages. And when the translation was done, I found that this book of mine is not going to serve, is not going to do anything for the middle class. That's why I burned it down. He translated the whole novel, 700 pages. But after the translation of the novel, he came to this conclusion that this book is not going to serve my worldview. That's why he burned it down and he did not publish, and nobody ever saw that translation. So I posed this example because I wanted to tell you that there is a big association between Dr. Yunesi's worldview and the works he translated. So please don't remember that he was a member of that, let's say, political party, that all of them became imprisoned after, let's say, what happened to, let's say, dear poor Dr. Mossadegh in 1331. There were 12 people. 11 of them went through capital punishment. 11 of them. The only one who was not beheaded, let's say, was Dr. Yunesi. Why? Because a couple of years before that, when he was a general, an army officer in nowadays Urumia and those days Rezaiye, he lost one of his legs. And the Kurd decided that based on this high service to the, let's say, to the Shah, so we are not going to kill him. However, he should spend some years in prison. It was in prison that he learned English, he learned French. It was in prison that he translated Great Expectations into Persian in the year 1336. And the book was published in Tehran in 1336 when he was in prison by one of his friends. So he remained in prison for some 9 years. After that, he went to Sorbonne, where he obtained his PhD in economy from Sorbonne University in Paris. So there is a big association, a close affinity between his worldview that's going to serve the ideals of the proletariat, the ideals of the middle class, a good hope in something like a let's say, a classless society. Whatever Dr. Yunesi translated served this ideal. Once I met him personally, and he told me something in person, I was surprised. He told me that Proust, Joyce, and Kafka, they are the enemies of humanity, and every translator who's going to go through their works, there's something like something like having done something like a treason. I was really transfixed and surprised. Oh my goodness, how come Dr. Yunesi is going to tell something? It was after a couple of years that I read exactly the same thing in one of his interviews. How come? Because Dr. Yunesi believed in that literature, those literary works, the theme of which is going to be hope in a better future. to deal with the humanitarian aspects of human, let's say, of the spiritual, let's say, humanitarian aspects in your life, aspirations, and better social relations, no oppression, no depression. That's the literature Dr. Yunesi translated. So in order not to waste the time, I have divided the whole work of his, he came up finally with some 80 books of translations. And we can divide it into two major parts. On one hand, we have the authoring, and the other hand, we have the translation. In the authoring part, he has a work in the art of fiction called هنر داستان‌نویسی 1341. Also, he was involved in the composition of some novels, like گورستان غریبان, دادا شیرین. He wrote some half a dozen of novels in the last 2 decades of his life. So whatever he wrote, not he translated, whatever he authored is going to be divided into two major parts. One, the art of fiction, the other one, the novels. Then we came to the translations. In the translation, I have divided the whole translations into 4 major groups. In the first group, those works that are outlining, that are investigating the socio-political questions, and those works that are going to be on the, let's say, the socio-political issues. This is the first kind. He translated 13 books, 13 huge books in this regard. Those books that were involved, because Dr. Yunesi was born in Bana, a city in Kurdistan, and that's why he translated a dozen of books about the Kurds, like Khordad و کردستان، تاریخ معاصر کرد، جنبش ملی کرد، کردها، ترکها، عربها، مسئله کرد، جامعه شناسی مردم کرد، جنبش ملی کرد، blah 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 blah. So more than a dozen of books about the Kurds. The second type of translations is going to be the memoir, خاطرات دوران خبرنگاری، خاطرات نیکیتا خروشچر. The third part is going to be those books about literature and arts. The most famous of which is going to be سیری در ادبیات غرب مال پریسلی، جیمی پریسلی، تاریخ اجتماعی هنر، آرنولد هاورز، تاریخ ادبیات روسیه، جنبه‌های رمان، ادوارد مورگان فورستر، aspects of novel، ادبیات آفریقا، تاریخ ادبیات یونان. Then we come to the translation of literary works. In the translation of the literary works, he translated The Tempest by Shakespeare as a play. Then, now it's time to emphasize the last part of the translations, the translations of the novels. Translation of the novels. From Charles Dickens, he translated Great Expectations, The Signal Man, Alamatchi, اطلاف تو cities, داستان دو شهر, Bleak House, خانه قانون زده. From George Eliot, The Mill on the Floss, آسیا به کنار فانوس. And from Thomas Hardy, A Pair of Blue Eyes, به جفت چشم آبی. Far from the Madding Crowd, به دور از اجتماع خشمگین، لیتران به دور از مردم شوریده. Jude the Obscure, جود گمنام, The Return of the Native, and The Hand of Italy, translated into Das Samide. From Theodor Dreiser, Tekiega, The Bulwark, and also from Dostoevsky. The last work, which, as Miss Melbury mentioned, is going to be considered one of the masterpieces of his translations, is going to be that novel which sometimes is going to be referred to by some of the critics as the father or the forefather or the pioneer in what's going to be generally referred to as the postmodern literature. That famous novel in the English world called Tristram Shandy. This novel has been written in the 18th century. And it's going to be considered as the forefather of the postmodern world. Since there are several innovations, several, let's say, technical figures for the first time appeared in that novel. That was a brief introduction to his life, his works. And the kind of literature he was involved in, he translated, he lived with. Unfortunately, a couple of months ago, he died. And he left some 80 books of translations. We all do owe him. And that is the end part of the end of the first part of our workshop. After a short break and reception, we shall have some practical translations. We are going to